Inspiring connection. Restore. Renew. Reconnect. Live. Laugh. In love. Connections. Dreams. Getaway experiences. Brave Heart Workshops. Unique Getaways live with Jill Reynolds.
The Connection Show. Restore, renew, and reconnect in community. Sponsored by Brave Heart Workshops live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today is Tiffany Hinton from Chicagoland area. Hi, Tiffany. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning. Well, thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on the show. And did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did.
That's good. I always should ask that before I go live, but thank you so much, Tiffany, for joining us. And I'd love to introduce a little bit about who Tiffany is to you so that you know her background. She's an author of the #1 Amazon bestsellers, Gluten-Free Mom Certified and Mom Certified Celebrates Heritage, and has written or contributed to over 16 allergen-sensitive books. Besides being a best-selling author, she's also a lifestyle blogger, a professional brand influencer, a functional medicine certified health coach, an all-around gluten-free expert based in the Chicagoland area. She specializes in content development for wellness brands and media outlets, covering topics like healthy living, gluten-free advocacy, allergen-sensitive parenting, women's wellness, and chronic illness recovery. Tiffany has been featured in many nationally syndicated news outlets, as well as serves as a keynote presenter for numerous conferences and movements. Her mission is to hear 1 million stories in 10 years of women who have found healing that created life changes so they can share their path to wellness with others. She wants you and your family to thrive. And she's got her Thrive t-shirt on. Tiffany wants you to have a life and a body that you love and wants you to be the healthiest and happiest version of yourself. So what an amazing bio, and she has 3, correct, lovely children, and an amazing husband as well.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, we have 3 little ones at home. I don't know how little they are. The oldest just turned 9, so.
That's still little.
It's still little. They still need supervision and help, and yes.
So share with us a little bit about how this journey of wellness came into fruition in your life and what was going on in your life that led you into this line of work.
Yeah. This is the short version because I could talk about this for days. I absolutely love it. I grew up not knowing I had celiac disease. And so I grew up with, I think, many other people that have had a chronic illness that's been either undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for several years can relate. Having gastro issues, having acid reflux, constipation, feminine issues around when my period did start. It would last sometimes 60 days before it would go away. And they really couldn't figure out what was wrong. And then in the early 2000s, I moved to Chicagoland for a job, and I was super excited because there was big university hospitals, and growing up in rural America, I'd always heard about, all these great hospitals and the universities and stuff that you would have access to. And I was super excited about that and didn't really get the care I wanted initially. Got the push around, got what I always had received when I was younger of, we don't know what's really going on. Why don't you just take these pills? And I had been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, or IBD is what people now refer to it, irritable bowel disorder. But nobody could actually tell me the root cause and what was causing the bowel and my colon to be irritated. And then in 2007, ended up in the emergency room for an appendicitis attack. They removed my appendix and told me that it had something growing all over it, but they didn't know what it was. And I thought that was interesting for a doctor, he didn't know. And I was like, wait, I thought you guys were supposed to know everything. And that was just the conception I had, right? My perception. And it came back, I had stage 4 endometriosis. And so for people that are not familiar, that's the tissue that's supposed to be growing inside your uterus was now growing all over my body outside. Ended up having multiple surgeries over the course of about 3 years. I had 8 different abdominal surgeries, including a colon recession and laparoscopic surgeries, and everything in my middle section of my body had kind of fused because of the endometrial tissue, and it had just kind of created all these little fissions and rubber bands and internal hernias. So my kidneys were in the front instead of the back, and everything was just kind of all over the place. That started me down low of finding a functional medicine doctor myself. And that gentleman is no longer in practice. He's in his 80s, but he was to me like just amazing. He was an Eastern trained Pakistani doctor, trained in that Eastern medicine and Ayurvedic, and at the same time Western medicine, had served in the U.S. military, and now owned his own practice, his own building, and wasn't really affiliated with a hospital, and could treat how he wanted. And he treated you in that kind of fusion, what we now call functional medicine, but I didn't really know the term functional medicine in 2008. Put me on a different diet, had me eating different foods, had me tested for celiac disease, and that came back positive, which was a life changer. And within 3 years of working with this new doctor, we had 3 children. And I had believed since I was 16 that I would never be able to have my own children. And so God had a hand in that for sure. But that's kind of what triggered my like passion. And I had seen what I was able to do. And so I started working with other women who had either been diagnosed with celiac or another chronic illness to let them see the light. And then 4 years ago, I went back and got a degree in functional medicine, health coaching.
Wow. Well, it's funny. I came to your house one time for a what was it called? The Hawaiian dance.
We had like a women's goddess retreat. At our house. Yeah.
What's that dance called? Belly dancing. Belly dancing. And I met you, but there were so many women there. I never really had a chance to sit and talk with you, but to share a little bit with the audience about my journey and why I'm passionate about what you do. I, at 5 years old, started having tummy aches and kept telling my parents my tummy hurts. And I'm 66 years old, being born in the 50s and eating lots of pasta and bread and white flour, no one listened to me. And of course, my father, being German descent, was clean up your plate. And so at 5, I started chewing and spitting my food out into a napkin because my tummy kept hurting and no one was listening. So I wasn't thriving. I was very, very malnourished. And this continued until like 14 years old. I was date raped. And I started taking amphetamines. And the amphetamines I took because I didn't want to develop a body, and continued on, not as heavily into it. I got off of it, but I just remember my whole life growing up barely ever eating. It was like a thing that I was really afraid of food. And then in my early 20s, I got addicted to cocaine and continued to just eat one meal a day. And my one meal a day was a bowl of rice Chex cereals. It was like or Life cereal. And that's what I lived on for about 6 or 7 years. So I was extraordinarily malnourished. And through that time, because I was on so many different drugs, I really never knew how I felt. So I never, like where you said you went through a period of time of really being ill, I didn't feel that sick. I just didn't feel that well. And being that I was raised with a lot of abuse in my family, I learned how to, at an early age, my mom yelled at me when I got sick, and I would feel punished. So I learned at an early age never to tell anyone when I was sick. And so my body just assimilated to being able to handle a 20 pain. And it wasn't until years later that I got diagnosed, the same as you, with endometriosis really bad. And it had several laparoscopes. And then finally, one day I was driving on the expressway in Chicago at 65 miles an hour, and the pain was about a 50. I had to pull, and my head went back and I almost blacked out. I pulled off the road and found out that the endometriosis had attached to my tailbone and my bladder. And the pain was so bad on my tailbone, it almost knocked me unconscious. So then I went to a doctor who put me back then on Lupron injections to stop my menstrual cycle. And it worked, and the endometriosis healed, and I too then got pregnant. But what I didn't realize is how the ramifications of the Lupron injection, and how I started then to have so much muscle and connective tissue issues as a result of the Lupron, because it was a great drug to get rid of endometriosis, but not a great drug for my body. And I continued on like you, Tiffany. I think at one time my account had been 90 doctors I had seen, and I had a 3-ring binder that was the 5 or 6 inch that I had tabs with all of my medical records, tabbed with MRIs, CAT scans, blood tests, and I was tracking my own. I was like my own doctor. And it wasn't until finally, and I had colonoscopies and endoscopes that came back of suspicious of celiac, but not conclusive. So one day I went in to see this one doctor, Dr. Mario Affinetti, who does research, and he was an internal medicine, and just said, hey, would you just take my binder as long as you want, bill me however you want, and call me. So he called me about 3 weeks later and told me to go get the gliadin test at 2 separate labs, and so, because of false positive readings, which I did, and they both came back positive. But that wasn't where my journey stopped then, because and I'd love for you to address this, and I'm almost done with my story. As most people don't understand, the GI doctors that diagnose you with celiac will say, go home and be gluten-free. Well, when you've had disordered or eating disordered lifestyle since 5 years old, and someone tells you to go home and eat a specific way, but doesn't hold your hand, it's almost impossible to know what that means. So I tried doing what they said and just wasn't getting better. Even though I was doing gluten-free, I couldn't get better. So I finally found Dr. Carol Semrid at the University of Chicago's Cure Celiac Foundation, and she did the genetic blood test on me and said, you have the gene. And then I met with Lori, her dietitian, for 2 hours, who sat down with me and said, have you bought a new toaster? Have you thrown away all your plastic utensils? Have you bought gluten-free lipstick and gluten-free lotion and gluten-free shampoo? And she just kept going down the line. Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? And so I then went back every 3 months for about 2 years and got my labs done and was part of their mouse studies for Cure Celiac. And it just saved my life. And the one thing that I think for me, and I'd love to hear your opinion, that I learned, and it makes me crazy, is when doctors or people will tell an individual who's having physical issues, go gluten-free and see how you feel. And I just want to go through the roof. And I'm like, do you not know celiac can cause colon cancer and lymphoma? Why are you doing this? First get tested so you know what your villi is like, and if your small bowel is spiraled. Please first find out what's wrong with you before you start eliminating foods, so that you know unequivocally what's wrong. So I would love for you to address that. And the reason I say that is because a person could go gluten-free and start to feel better, but they could already be in stage 2 or 3 or 4 colon cancer, and they never went and got tested for it. So I'm going to pause, but that's my story, and I would love now if you could share then some of the things from what I shared with you, comment back on anything that you've heard and tell me what you know.
Yeah, Jill, that's an incredible story. Oh my gosh. Wow. I am completely aligned with you in the fact that if you are having gastro issues, you should seek somebody that can do some scoping, can do some imaging, can do some biopsies, because if you don't figure out what the cause is and you continue to treat symptoms and we don't actually figure out the true problem, and that's part of the functional medicine training, you will never alleviate it. Whatever it is, it will never go away. It will just continue to be there, and then you'll think that, oh, well, I'll take this or I'll do that or I'll go gluten-free and I'll feel better. But like you said, you don't change the lipstick, you don't change the lotion, you don't change all this other stuff, and you don't get to be 100%, right? And that's one of the areas where It's very interesting. So there are a few GI doctors in the Chicago area that I now refer people to, and there's a few that I always tell people don't go see them because of the way in which they care for their patients. And that makes the huge difference. If you are going to diagnose somebody with celiac disease or another disease in which they have to change their lifestyle, then the doctor should also be prescribing some counseling, some, a registered dietitian or a health coach or somebody to help them. I will tell you, when I was first diagnosed gluten-free and he told me I had celiac, he gave me a piece of paper and he basically said, you can eat anything on the list. And I was like, okay. And that was at least a step positive, 10, 15 years ago versus just don't eat, which you were told just don't do it, right? So he actually said, just eat anything on the list. But it still hit me emotionally. And I came home that day and I was like, well, this is the paper. This is my pantry. And if it's not on this list, I can't have it. And my emotions, and there's a whole emotional scale I'm sure that you are aware of, and many people watching this, right? So I got to that angry emotion, and I started not knowing what I was doing, but at the time started tossing things like a baseball into a box in the kitchen. We lived in a condo at the time, because if I wasn't going to eat it, then my husband was not going to eat it. And we didn't have the girls yet, and he was just, I think, a little taken off, oh my gosh, you're like this monster. But you deal with that emotion. The other thing I know through health coaching is I've actually worked with a lady who's anorexic and had been anorexic prior to being diagnosed with food allergies. And it triggered, right? It triggered her anorexia again. And then she got to where when she was sent to me by her doctor, she was only eating nuts. And that was all she'd eat were nuts. And it's you can't live on just nuts, even though we understand that you feel like you're not allergic to nuts and everything else you're allergic to. And that's just where her mind had shifted. And so we had to, it was a good 8-month journey, 8 months of just trying to get her to open up, to try and introduce different things. And the interesting thing is, like you mentioned, when you have a disorder or something going on around food, and then there's something compounding it, for this woman, it was setting a goal. She had been a marathon runner. So setting this goal that she wanted to do a half marathon, and knowing that in order to do the half marathon, she needed to have a certain carb intake every day. And she knew that was our area of starting. And then she started to open up and create plans and would start to eat different things. But it is a journey. It is truly a journey.
Well, I'm so grateful that you said that just now, Tiffany, because I myself went to treatment 5 times for my eating disorder. And I led Eating Disorders Anonymous meetings in Chicago for 4 years and sponsored quite a few people in recovery. And back, I'd say 5 years ago, when people would be diagnosed in that level that you said, this girl coming in with anorexia with just eating the nuts, today's new diagnosis codes would more classify that as a combination of restrictive avoidance disorder, and now even more deadly, I think, in many ways, is orthorexia, clean eating. And, nothing drives me crazier than all of these commercials and restaurants and people promoting clean eating. You must do paleo, you must do keto, you got to eat clean. If you don't eat clean, you're not going to be healthy, because people do not understand that puts an emotional disease into that person's brain, that all food is bad except for this. And the orthorexic community gets so severely diseased that they cannot even eat at restaurants anymore. They can't go to family functions because the food may not be clean enough for them. And so, in treatment, I learned that all food is good, eaten in balance, and doing deprivation food plans will cause you to be sicker, because your brain can't stay in deprivation mode. I mean, when we stay in deprivation mode during social distancing, look at all the anxiety, depressive disorders that are hitting the streets, deprivation of attachment. And, so when you are diagnosed with celiac, you eat in balance. You eat gluten-free, but you eat in balance. And sure, you might want to lean more towards, lean proteins and vegetables and fruits, but staying in balance, not abstinence, is the road to recovery.
Absolutely. And it's, I love that you said that, Jill, because it is a balance, right? It's a balance of colors. It's a balance of trying new things. It's an adventure when you are diagnosed with celiac or a food allergy, because there's so many other things that you can try. I have learned how to cook more ethnically. We do a lot of Indian food in our house, and we at one point we were cooking Ethiopian and African food, and just because they don't always use grain, and so it's really cool to start to learn a new culture, a new food, because it fits within your balance, but it's also an adventure. And so seeking those new things is always important as well for people that have a new diagnosis.
Well, and with that too, one thing that, I mean, again, as I went through this process, and Dr. Carol Semrad said, I want to just, warn you, because by the time I got diagnosed, I went from being a really, really malnourished small size, like really small, sunken eyes, everything, to being completely, totally obese. And because the people don't understand, when you have celiac, as long as I have all my life, and your body's not being nutritionally fed with protein, you then become obese. And so where many doctors misdiagnosed is they kept looking for the anorexic patient, and they weren't looking at the obese population, because they thought, oh, you're just eating so much food, and they didn't realize what was going on is when you have celiac and your villi is gone and your small bowel is spiraled like mine is, every single ounce of food you put in your body is turning to sugar and fat, because you're not absorbing any protein at all. And so your body just gets larger and larger and larger. And so for me, by the time I figured this out and realized the obesity, it got to a place where I was like, what can I eat now? And so Dr. Semrad said, I just got to warn you, gluten-free products are really, really, really high in calories. And she goes, you're going to gain a lot of weight if you eat a lot of the processed gluten-free. And my one doctor said to me, Jill, a rule of thumb is to take, if you want, and I hate like studying labels because that goes into eating disordered behavior, but he said, if you, just to get you knowing what to eat, if you don't make pure not good, but food that you're making and baking yourself, look at the carbs and divide it by the fiber. And if the number is higher than a 7, you're going to be turning that into sugar. So when I first started hearing that, I went to the store, I went to Whole Foods, Tiffany, and started reading every label, Rudy's and Udi's and all these, and they were coming out to be 30s. And I'm like, my gosh, I'm eating a bowl of sugar. And it amazed me how many people in our culture think eating gluten-free is healthier. I'm like, you're eating bowls of sugar.
Yeah,
and
it's not a diet.
No.
For sure.
And I'm like, oh. So I literally went on the internet and looked for every single manufacturer of gluten-free breads. And I finally found Katz, K-A-T-Z in New York.
Okay.
And I looked on their site, and they used to have about 6. They're down to only about 1 or 2 now of products that come in around 7 to 10. And of breads out there that for people who aren't gluten-free, the only one I found at a 7 was Ezekiel. That was the only, and it's not a gluten-free bread, but for those who don't. But I mean, it's amazing how when we think something might be better for our body, it could actually be putting us more in a diabetic mode. And insulin glucose is going like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about, I'd love to hear, about how then you merged into writing books on the subjects, getting in the speaking arena and being a spokesperson. But also I'd love to hear a bit about how you said, some of these ethnic foods, how you started creating some nutrition, I don't like good and bad, nutritionally based food products that would feed your body instead of make it sick. And before you say that, I wanted to say one last thing about this. I had one doctor, Tiffany in Crystal Lake. He's like 80 years old now, and he's mean and grumpy as you can imagine, but as smart as can be on celiac and allergy testing. He does neutralized allergy testing, Dr. Gary Oberg in Crystal Lake, and he does hormone stuff. He's smart as a whip. But he was one person who helped me more than anything. He said, Jill, if you get just a tiny speck, like he's small, like the size of, I don't know, the smallest speck you can imagine, just of gluten in your cell. Mm-hmm. He said, what I want you to do, just go out and just take a couple, make 2 crumbs off of bread and eat it. Then what I want you to do, I want you to walk up to the stove and put your hand into the flames and tell me how you feel. And I just looked at him and he goes, no, seriously. Because all you're doing is burning your cells, and it's going to take about 4 to 6 weeks to get that gluten out of your cells. And I wanted to share that because when I finally went completely, totally 100% gluten-free and followed what everyone told me to do, it took 4.5 years until my labs came back normal. Like, I can test today and it will show nothing that I have celiac if I test today because, my gliadins are normal. Mm-hmm. But it took 4.5 years to get the gluten out of my cells.
Yeah, for sure. They say if you cut, the Celiac Center says if you cut a slice of white bread into like 452 pieces, the piece that's left over, the 453rd piece is enough to put somebody 3 weeks in bed, vomiting, whatever their reactions are. Yeah, it's dangerous sometimes, for sure. Your question was, how did I get into cookbooks and how did I get into meal planning and all of that? It started in the beginning when I realized that me growing up, standard American, right? Macaroni and cheese, grilled cheeses, nachos. My mom worked 3rd shift when I was a kid. So everything was microwavable or stovetop. And that's just, what we did. But yet every time I was with my grandmothers, I had learned how to cook. I had learned how to make bread. I had learned my mother's mother had fruit trees and gardens. So I had learned from the farm, like how to do stuff, but yet in my own house growing up, it was really quick and easy. And so here we are, I'm in Chicagoland. I've been diagnosed with celiac disease, told that I can only eat the things on the list. And what was very interesting is everything on the list was like a whole food, right? So it was either whole grains like rice or chicken or green beans, or just, it wasn't anything that was processed. There were no brands. There was no go buy this bread, none of that. It was just a whole list of all these real foods. And when I did go, I remember going to a Jewel Osco, and we're talking 2007. And I had picked up some stuff that was labeled gluten-free, and I tasted it, and I was like, this is like cardboard. And it was supposed to be bread, right? And I say supposed to be because it was not bread. I don't know what they made it out of, but it was awful. And I realized, like, I know how to cook better than this. This is ridiculous. We're paying $10 for 4 slices, and I'm exaggerating, but that's what it felt like. And I'm like, I know how to do better than this. Like, my grandmothers that raised me taught me how to do this. I understand chemistry when it comes to baking. So why am I not just using my list of allowed stuff and creating? And that was that turning point. And I started with, I had a binder, and I can remember clear as day. It was like a red, flimsy, flexi binder. And I would hole punch pages and put them in there, and I would chicken scratch, and I would create, and I would change recipes, or I would try to make cobblers that I had remembered from childhood, right? And I would update it. And a friend of ours, her daughter got diagnosed with a gluten and a dairy allergy. So basically it was a wheat and a dairy allergy. And she called me and she said, that binder in your kitchen? I was like, yeah. She's like, I need a copy. I was like, no, sorry, Alicia, no. And it was more out of shame because I didn't feel that it was good enough to share. And I didn't feel like she would be able to read and articulate all the scratches and the scribblings and just the mess. And she was in tears, and she's like, you don't understand, my daughter's just diagnosed. I don't know what to feed her. And that was the point in my heart that got me, was her crying. And I sat down that evening on my computer and I started typing it. And I typed it into a document. We turned it into an Amazon book because I didn't know how to publish. I had no idea what publishing was, but Amazon had their create space at the time, turned that Word document into an Amazon book, and we sold that first 3 months about 9,000 copies.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I guess more than Alicia needs this. From there, we were invited by Jen Cafferty, who owns the gluten-free marketing group and the expo circuit. She had a keynote speaker cancel on her. This has been forever ago, it seems like. And she called me on a Friday because we had met at a library event, because I went to a library to meet her, and just because she had her own like stuff going on, and I was trying to figure out where's the celiac community in Chicago and who are they and how do I learn and, you know, get these connections that we can relate to. And she called me on a Friday and she said, I have a spot on Sunday. I need a speaker. And I was like, I don't speak. And she's like, you have a best-selling book and you don't speak? And I was like, no, not me. And she's like, well, how about you just tell your story? And I was like, okay, I can get dressed up and come tell my story. Right. And that was the beginning. That was really the beginning. It was in Schaumburg, the Renaissance Hotel. And I show up on a Sunday, not having an idea what her expo was like, walking in, and it was awesome. Right. To me, I'd grown up going to boat shows and car shows. And I was like, oh, this is like a food show. And telling that story and then having people line up afterward just to talk, to learn who my doctor was, to learn what I was eating, to figure out how do I get that book of yours. It was inspiring, and it really got me thinking, like, there are people that need help and there's no reason I can't help them. Like, I've been put in this situation for a reason. I grew up Christian, and so for me, everything has a purpose or a reason, or I try to put it there if it doesn't. And that's where it began. We went on to create several more cookbooks that were gluten-free. My kids had food allergies, so we created a kids cookbook, top 8 free birthday book, and they were all kind of themed in different things. When my husband's dad passed away, we created one based on soul food as just it was a grief project, to be honest. We were going through photos and recipes, and we were wanting to taste the food that we would have tasted if we had went to his house, right? That's where all of that started, and it evolved. International best-selling book last year, multiple speaking engagements until the virus showed up and closed everything. And it's just continuing to evolve. I focus more now on rainbow diets, and I hate to call them diets, but rainbow plates, and making sure that you're getting nutrients, and that if your body is craving salt or you're craving sugar or you're craving whatever, that you're not stopping the cravings, but you're finding a healthy alternative. And I work with a lot of the women, and when they are like, I just want potato chips, it's like, well, what do you crave about the chips? Is it the crunchiness? Is it the taste? Is it the salt? Like, what do you want? And then let's figure out, maybe you can still eat those, or maybe you want to have something else because your body actually wants magnesium or something like that. A lot of it science-based, doing the blood work up front, knowing where your nutrients are so you know what to go and seek in food. It's evolving, and it's just continuing to change. And then with the virus moving in and everything getting kind of slowed down or turned online, I've been doing a lot more writing. So we're doing a lot of freelance writing now as well.
Well, you know what hit me when you were, thanks so much. That's amazing stuff you're doing. I'm just like, I wish I would have been able to spend more time with you in Chicago when I lived in Chicago. But man, it's just amazing how your journey has evolved. But as you were speaking towards the very end, I'm seeing a functional medicine person here in Branson, and Amy does emotional code therapy, where you're able to, she says on a list an emotion, and you're able to tell what emotion is stuck in your body. And so as you were speaking on the potato chips with the woman, again, going back to my story of being raised in a very dysfunctional home, we were lockheed children, and my mom used to work from like 3 in the afternoon or 4 in the afternoon till 2 or 3 in the morning, and we'd literally come home from school. I'd call my grandma and say, Grandma, how do you make a meatloaf, or how do you make this? And at 5, 6, 7 years old, I was trying to figure out how to feed myself. Well, we ended up then taking the food and always sitting in front of the TV. So as children, my TV was my comfort from my fear and my loneliness. And so then as an adult, no matter how many times, no matter how many treatment centers I went to, how many times I tried not to snack at night. And it could be like I could start with 2 clementine oranges. Then I would want a yogurt. And then I'd want a bag of popcorn. And it was like I could not stop snacking at night. And you could have sat there and put me on 5 million food plans, and I would have been like, I can't stop doing this. And it wasn't until I finally was able to slow it down, and I still have some trouble with this to this day, and go, okay, what is going on? Oh, when I get done working and I have dinner, and then I sit down around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night to watch some TV, the minute I sit down, within 5 minutes, I'm getting up and having to get my snacks. I get one, and then I get up again, one, and get up again. And it's all connected to this loneliness and feelings that the TV is my friend to connect me, and I have to have the food to go with it. And when you did that, they say that you learn the most in your life between birth and like 5-10 years old. And those thoughts stay with you. So to break those thought patterns with the emotions it's life-changing. And again, like I said, I still, to this day, I just had my holistic doctor give me this recipe. I have to share it with you. It's really good, with manna butter and coconut and pecans, and mix it together and put it in the freezer. And it's like a peanut brittle, but it's all natural.
Nice.
And it's really yummy. And so I have a big pan of it. And so at night now, when I want it, I'll take a slice of that, and I might sit down with a banana, and it's like, wow, I'm full now. Like, I'm okay. Like, I might even take little pieces at a time, because I like to get up every 10 minutes. And then I'll feel like, okay, I got my 10 minutes every 10 minutes, but it's still about the same size. But, well, with this social distancing, how have you and your family, at least you have people that you live with, children are exciting, how have you been dealing with connection during the social distancing?
We have done a lot more video. I joined some coffee mornings, which I don't know that I would have done in the past, and was doing like coffee chats. I joined a Sunday evening women's book club because I wanted connection. My daughter actually had a birthday during all of this, and we did a Zoom birthday with her friends and her grandparents all on the video. The thing I would say, though, about the social distancing is that even though we have to stay 2 meters apart, most of my neighbors are European, so they still say meters instead of 6 feet. So I constantly hear people saying 2 meters, 2 meters. We're still talking to people across the fence, right? Or across the street. We just stand on our sides, and we still do all of that. The hardest part is the fear in the beginning. The fear that you yourself will get sick, or the fear that you might make somebody else sick. And I think once you move through that fear and you figure out like what is your personal way to acknowledge the fear, to learn to live with it or let it go, then you can figure out how do you reconnect with people.
Yeah, and thanks for saying that. Like for me, I'm 66 years old, and because of a lot of health issues over the years, having autoimmune disease, because a lot of people with celiac have autoimmune, I was like, okay, do I stay stuck in fear and that I'm going to be sick, and if I get it, I'm going to pass away? And what I'm going to say next is not at all minimizing anyone's fear at all. I'm not trying to minimize, but for me, I had to get to a place where, I discovered, take 2 lemons, 2 oranges, 2 limes, cut it up, put a little bit of really good olive oil and some ginger root and garlic, and drink that baby every single day. And I mean, get your body alkaline. I started ordering alkaline water and doing things like that I hadn't done before. And so just doing things to boost up my immune system. And then, believe it or not, so after I did those steps, I literally, everybody has their own. I don't want to wear a mask. I'm not going to stay in. I'm a water aerobics person. As soon as we're done here, I'm going outside and doing my hour and a half water aerobics. And for me, I'm not going to have the fear of I might get sick and die permeate my life. And I'm not minimizing, because I do have a therapist that I do work with whose mother-in-law did die in New York. So I know people that have passed away. But for me, as long as I keep taking care of myself and doing the right things, and I feel relatively safe, that if I got sick, I take the drugs that they say, and, I'm going to get better. So that's me. That's just me personally, and everyone has to do what's best for themselves. So with us being now in June, what are your dreams for the remainder of the year?
That the world opens.
Yes.
That school goes back in session. Those are dreams right now, because we don't actually know if they're going to open the buildings in the fall or not. I also, I want to still do a back to school guide. We had planned a back to school guide, and we did a holiday guide last year. So I'd still love to be able to do those. And I may actually now include like a at-home school or a homeschooling section in our back to school guide for kids with allergies. Because I wouldn't have thought about that in the past. I would have been like, I don't know. But now as I experienced it, I'm like, yeah, they need help too, because I was dying. The other thing I think that I dream of, or I know that I dream of, is I want to travel. So I'm sitting with United credits because flights got canceled, events got canceled, and I was supposed to be in California next week, and that's canceled. So I definitely want to travel. We're wanting to go to Seattle, do the whole market again if they're opening the market, do some hiking out there. I fell in love with that side of the Pacific, that northern piece of it. And so definitely that's a dream of mine.
Okay.
I was supposed to go to London in October. I don't know if that's going to happen. If we open, I'm not afraid of the virus, so I will travel. I will bring my kids. My kids will travel. So I guess Frankie's biggest thing right now is, since traveling is so inexpensive, because that's how she sees it. Actually, she said cheap. Can we fly first class to Seattle? I told her we would check into that one.
I love that. That's really cute. Well, that led me into my getaway experiences. So you've already covered that with your dreams. And then my last two questions to you is, if someone told you had to get rid of all your apps and you could only keep two, what are your two must-haves?
Must-haves on my phone. Oh my gosh, that's such a hard one. Our astrology app, because we can point it at the sky and it tells us the star constellations, and that is something we love right now. So I would keep that one. Probably Instagram.
Okay. I thought you were going to say, find me gluten-free. When you're going out, I need find me gluten-free restaurants.
But memorized, which is so sad how much time I've spent on there the last decade.
Yeah. I thought for sure that would be your first one. It's kind of fun. And what's one fun fact about you?
That I was a baton twirler growing up, and actually went to state one year because I was so good at it. Don't ask me now, I'd probably hit myself in the head. But wow. That was one fun fact.
Were you in marching bands and stuff?
Yes, marching bands, football halftime shows, state fair, county fairs. We used to travel around and do all of that.
Wow. And have you taught your daughters how to twirl?
I have not. My batons I did find in the garage when I was cleaning during the virus and our quarantine, but no, I have not taught them.
Well, I'm going to put on the screen now Tiffanys Bio and how you can reach her with some websites. And when I do post this on YouTube, it will be on there too, so that you'll be able to reach out to Tiffany. And also it has her media relations person's contact, so you can schedule her for conferences in your area. And, check out her Amazon books, please, too, and get some good cooking tips that will really help you. So I am so grateful that we had this time today to meet. And before we close, I would just like to let the audience know that the Connection Show looks for leaders just like Tiffany that would love to be on the show and share their wisdom with the audience. So if you'd like to be on our show, please go to braveheartworkshops.com, that's workshops with an S, and fill out the contact form, and we'll schedule a time so that we can have you as one of our treasured guests on the show. And for you in the audience, if you've enjoyed connecting today with Tiffany, many of our leaders, when they do have time, come on to our brand new Zoom connection group, which meets Monday evenings at 8 Eastern Time, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, and 5 Pacific Time. Now, to be able to join those Zoom connections and connect with people that are leaders and other people around the globe, you must go to the Connection Show Gathering Tribes private Facebook page, which I'll post the link to, and join with your email so that you can have the secure Zoom password to join us. So we do hope that you'll come this Monday and join us on the show. And Tiffany, if you're free ever on a Monday night, it would be great to connect with the audience. It's a great way. One thing that we're hoping is as the show continues to grow and leaders connect, that we can start to plan some getaway experiences with these leaders, and you'll already know them and will really feel connected and will want to be in attendance and learn from them. So I just wanted to thank you again, Tiffany. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thrive. I love that word, thrive. And we shall see you soon.
Thank you, Jill. It was such an honor. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Let's connect now. We can dream together to renew, restore, and reconnect with wellness in our life. Go to braveheartworkshops.com. Join me for weekly Zoom connections on Facebook at facebook.com/braveheartworkshops. Thanks so much for joining the show, and we look forward to seeing you on Monday night.